Well, good morning. Welcome to Dellview Baptist Church on this beautiful Sunday morning. Not so great this afternoon, I understand. As I was coming up to church today, the north wind has already started to blow in, so as we go out this afternoon, you may need your overcoats. I hope you brought them. Quick to listen, slow to speak. That's the title of my sermon today. It's a sermon about speech, and better yet, it's about our tongues. Some of you may remember a few years ago, I did a sermon about the dangers of our tongue, and I had a box that I put up here that had caution tape all over it and everything. And I told you that if it was ever to get out, what was in the box was ever to get out, that it would destroy the church if it got loose in the church. At the end of the sermon, I opened the box and it contained a large cow tongue, a real cow tongue. Today, I want to talk about the tongue, but this morning, I want to use the words of Jesus' half-brother, James. Now, James is writing to the 12 tribes of the Jewish believers who had been scattered around the known world at that time. He calls them his brothers and his sisters. You know, James was not always a believer. Growing up with Jesus as your older brother, it must have been different and difficult. I mean, I know how difficult it is for my cousin, who is like my brother, to accept that I'm a pastor now. When growing up, man, we got in all kinds of mischief. All kinds of mischief. I'm sure James thought he knew his older brother as well as anybody, but he never thought of him as the Son of God. I'm sure that when they were playing in the streets, he never looked at his brother and said, "Wow, I'm playing with the Son of God." I think James had a change of heart at the cross after seeing the resurrected Jesus. James writes in chapter 1, verse 19, "Understand this, my dear brothers and sisters, you must be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry." Quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry. What a lesson he teaches us. What a lesson. If we could just all do that, this would be a different world that we live in. For most of us, we're quick to listen, quick to speak, and super quick to get angry. We talked about anger a little bit last week, but being quick to speak is talking about controlling your tongue, and anger is very closely related to that. Proverbs 12:18 tells us, "Some people make cutting remarks, but the words of the wise bring healing." I like the NIV version of that a little bit better. It says it like this: "The words of the reckless pierce like swords, but the tongue of the wise brings healing." Another proverb tells us, "The tongue can bring death or life to those who love to talk. It will reap the consequences." You know, we all use words every day, but we don't always remember that our words are so powerful, so very powerful. Words have been responsible for starting wars and also for ending wars. Words either unite people or divide people. Words of individuals will determine that person's future or life. Words of the little words that spill out of our mouths every day impact the world around us. These sounds which flow out of our heart and into our mouth and into the air carry an amazing amount of power. I believe that words may be the most powerful force in the whole universe. Think about this. Words created the universe. Genesis 1 tells us that God spoke the world into existence. Jesus said that your words reveal what kind of heart you possess. He said what you say is what is in your heart. What flows out of your mouth is what's in your heart. The truth is, every one of your words matter. They influence someone either negatively or positively. How many times have you heard someone say, "Gosh, I wish I hadn't said that. I wish I hadn't said those words." Our text today, James addresses the issue of uncontrolled words of the tongue. We see this dilemma of words every day in our lives. We hear people say things throughout our day. Then we respond to them and create perceptions about the person that was speaking. We listen to the radio, and the power of the words influence us. We listen to CDs or our phones or the TV, and the power of words are at work. We watch TV, and the power of words are trying to influence us as well. Just think of all the political ads that we have had to endure over the last few months because of the election. We know that words influence others, or the political campaigns would not spend millions and millions of dollars to put them on the air. We had to endure candidates ripping on each other. Why? So they could influence you to vote for them. I watched the news one night, and the news decidedly take a few campaign ads to find out how accurate they were in their comments. It was interesting to note that some campaigns distorted the truth about the candidate. The power of words either creates a positive picture or a negative picture. I honestly do not think that words are neutral. They always leave an impression on the person hearing the words. Today, I want to focus on the power of words and learn a lesson from James on the importance of making sure that our words are always bridled, always kept in check. James reminds us we can make a large horse go wherever we want by means of a small bit in its mouth. And a small rudder makes a huge ship turn wherever the pilot chooses to go, even though the winds are strong. In the same way, the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches. Putting faith into action means that we control our words or we control our tongue. And James also has a warning here for teachers. For teachers. He's not even going to look at me. It applies to everyone who teaches, so it just about applies to all of us because we all teach our children. Why would he give a special warning about teaching? James knew that the power of the tongue of the teacher would influence other people. It would direct decisions they would make. It would affect their belief systems. It would affect how they live their lives. It would either lead them closer to God or farther away, and it would be done by the words of that teacher. Professors at universities know the power of words. Some intentionally try to lead students away from biblical values and teach only worldly values. That's why I worry about our young people when we send them off to college. I pray they won't let their teachers change the way they think about God and His world. Teachers will be held accountable by the Lord. All teachers will be accountable for the words of life or death. And we are all teachers. The mouth is filled with words, and they become the rudder of life for every one of us. Our mouth will direct the path that we take in our lives. What comes out of our mouth comes from the heart, and it determines where we're going. The tongue has the power to bring life or death into relationships, organizations, and even countries. James says, if you claim to be religious and don't control your tongue, you are fooling yourself and your religion is worthless. The blessing of the tamed tongue blames eternal benefits and life, not death. The tongue has a lot of control over how you live your life. The most powerful statements ever spoken in the Bible is found in Matthew 16. When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say the Son of Man is?" Verse 14 says, "Well," they replied, "some say John the Baptist." Others say Jeremiah or one of the other prophets. Then James put him on the spot when he asked, "But who do you say I am?" "You're the Messiah, the Son of the living God." Peter gave that answer. This whole scenario is addressing the subject of the power of the tongue. Jesus asked, "What are others saying about me?" The power of words are important. Then he asked the disciples, "What do you say about me?" We see the power of the tongue in this example. Peter makes a statement with his words, and Jesus honors him but reminds him that the Father revealed that to him. Then Jesus tells Peter that upon the confession of faith statement made by Peter, Jesus will build his church. Jesus is saying the power of the tongue is used to confess Jesus and to commit one's life to him that will be used to build his church. The spoken word is what will bring eternal blessings to your life. You know, God has used the media of teaching with anointed words to change and influence lives for eternity. Since creation, the devil has also used this same media to try and deceive people and get them cursed. In other words, he wants to use the uncontrolled tongue to set the path in the road to hell. You could say he wants us to burn and not turn. It's also critical to remember that James tells us the uncontrolled tongue is good. The controlled tongue is good, but it's a force that's left unchecked is full of evil. Uncontrolled words of the tongue have the ability to destroy the lethal force of a church, a country, a relationship, a family, a marriage, and yes, even a life. Words that flow from your tongue cut deeper than a knife into the other's heart and minds. Maybe you do not believe that you can speak life or death to others, but you can. You can. And some of you might be guilty of that. Some people allow the wild thing to lash out at others, and it explodes in people's lives like grenades. Words have been spoken in this church that have caused people to leave the church and even turn away from God. Let me ask you something. Have you ever spoken any of these words to anyone? You are worthless. You are stupid. Your lack of faith has made you sick. Your lack of faith has made you poor. You must be perfect, or God won't love you. You are a loser. You just can't do anything right, can you? It's all your fault. I wish you were never born. I hate you. It's their fault that I'm angry. Our marriage takes so much work. We must not be right for each other. Are you the one responsible for all our problems? You will never, ever change. You should have never, ever been born. You don't need to go to church. You don't have to tithe. You don't have to obey the 10 Commandments. You committed the unpardonable sin. And last, you just can't do anything right, can you? Folks, don't underestimate the power of your tongue. It's usually quick to destroy and slow to build up others. The Bible states that this should not be. James wants us to understand and to comprehend that this little thing that controls our speech and words is a force that needs to be controlled at all times. Folks, we need to take a reality check and check our tongues and evaluate if we're building others up or letting others down. I believe that most people would say they want to have a blessed life. They want revival in their church, in their community. But the problem is their tongue is into sin, and it destroys relationships. I've had people try to justify that their sinful tongue is just who they are, and they can't change the way they are. Some have even said that God made me this way. Let me speak to everyone who tries to justify sin with this lie. No, He did not. God did not make you that way. He is a holy God, and He does not make people sinful. People choose to be sinful. He's a holy God. James says it this way. And remember, when you're being tempted, do not say, God is tempting me. God is never tempted to do wrong, and He never tempts anyone else. Temptation comes from our own desires, which entice us and drag us away. These desires give birth to sinful actions, and when His sin is allowed to grow, it gives birth to death. Many of us recognize that we don't always control our tongues, but we do. We do not know how to deal with this sometimes. Let me assume that some of you have said, yes, I want to be delivered, but how do I do that? How do I change my life? James tells us that no one can control the tongue. Man cannot, on his own ability, control his tongue. He needs someone to help him tame it. This person is the Holy Spirit. We put our faith in action when we allow the Holy Spirit to control our tongue. We need to pray and ask the Holy Spirit to help us control our tongues. How does the Holy Spirit help us control our tongue? He does it by convicting us that when we say evil and hurtful things to others. Paul reminds us in his letter to the Galatians. He says, so I say, let the Holy Spirit guide your lives, then you won't be doing what your sinful nature craves. The sinful nature wants to do evil, which is just the opposite of what the Spirit wants. And the Spirit gives us the desire that are the opposite of what the sinful nature desires. These two forces are constantly fighting each other, so you are not free to carry out your good intentions. The point is that we need the Holy Spirit to help us to show how us to keep our tongues under control. James tells us to be quick to listen and slow to speak. It's our nature to do just exactly the opposite. Have you ever had an argument with somebody and they don't even hear what you're saying? They're so angry. They're just talking and talking and talking, and they're not listening to what you have to say. They seem to turn off their hearing so that nothing that you say makes any difference. Paul had some good advice to the people at Ephesus. He told them, don't use foul, abusive language. Let everything you say be good and helpful so that your words will be an encouragement to those who hear them. All too often, people make judgments or take actions without really knowing enough about the situation. Sometimes if we have nothing good to say, then we should say nothing. We all know how to speak four-letter words. We know how to speak threats. We know how to call names. But if we allow the Holy Spirit to direct our tongue, we won't use that type of language. So what do we need to know today? We need to put our faith into action by taming our tongues. If we don't, we will reap life, not death, not life. We need to know that there's power in our tongues, either blessings or cursings. We need to pray and ask the Holy Spirit to help us tame our tongues and be intentional about bringing it under control. If we do this, we grow spiritually, and we will be a blessing to others rather than a cursing. We will be filled with joy and not strife and chaos. James wants us to understand that our tongues wield supernatural power, and if we do not keep them tamed, bridled, and under control, they will lead our lives right into a firestone.